Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel. It's not EU, it's me. We're having a discussion today about how legislation across the EU is going to affect drug reform across the continent. I have a fantastic panel with me today. I'm just going to introduce myself briefly. My name is Sunny Hundal. I'm a journalist in the UK, written for most of the national newspapers. I am also on board of a group called Voltfast, which is a leading advocacy organization for drug reform. And we're going to get straight into it. So I'll just briefly ask the panel to introduce themselves. Ludovic Rachou is from France and the UK. Ludovic, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yes, hi. So my name is Ludovic. I founded a company called Rainbow, and we do different brands around cannabinoids, especially one in the UK called Kaya with food supplements, and one in skincare in France called Peace and Skin. And on top of that, I'm involved actively in the French hemp union, where we actually try to change regulation in France when it comes to hemp-derived products, both in France and the EU, actually.
Fantastic. And with me also is Kai-Fredrich Niermann. Kai, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sunny. Very happy to be here. I'm a lawyer here in Germany. I'm working in the cannabis space since 2017, since Germany legalized medical cannabis. I started a blog in 2018 on CBD. CBD was not very popular or not much known by that time, and people asked me what's the legal framework for that. Then I was invited to big conferences abroad, and now I'm consulting international and national companies in the CBD market who want to enter the German market. I'm the legal advisor of IHA, of the European Industrial Hemp Association. We are working on the novel food joint application for improving different CBD products. I'm looking forward to next year as we see some policy changes maybe in Germany with the next federal elections, and I'm happy to discuss this with you.
Fantastic. And also with me is Queralt from Spain. Sorry, Queralt, I can't see your surname. If you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Queralt, Prat-i-Pibill, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here today to participate in this panel. I am the president of Unión de Pacientes por la Regulación del Cannabis, which is an association made for patients to help and assist them to get the medications that they need from cannabis. We've been set up since 2017, and we are fighting for getting our rights defended in front of the law and to get our cannabis, the cannabis that we need. So that's all. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Queralt, let's start with you. When I spoke to you last, you told me about Spain. That's where you're from. That's where you live. Now, the Spanish government does not regulate cannabis, as you told me, but does not let individual states regulate cannabis either. And as far as you told me, the social clubs, which are currently, I think, mostly around the Catalonia region, don't address the demands of patients which are interested in more high quality products. So tell me about what you see as the key roadblocks in Spain and what are you working towards?
Yes, I think Spain in worldwide is a paradox because since maybe these last 10 years, we've seen a lot of countries going towards a legalization and an opening up of the cannabis market. And paradoxically, in Spain, we had since the 90s this possibility to get access to cannabis through the social clubs, which legally was set up as joined own cultivation done in groups, right? So you were not actually buying or selling, but participating in an association of collective cultivation, right? Now, since 2015, we have a new security law that it's publicly known as the gag law, which actually forbids the use of cannabis in public places. So this means that people are being fined for smoking cannabis on the streets or any public place where they are seen. Now, for example, in Barcelona, where I come from, we used to have, you could go through the city and see in the balconies the cannabis plants being planted there because people had their own cannabis, right? And it was legal. You could have 2 to 4 plants for your personal use. But now this has been forbidden since 2015 and you are being fined. So you cannot have plants in your balconies. So it cannot be seen from the public view, right? So in Spain, the situation is ambiguous. Next week, we have one group of people belonging to social clubs entering in prison for 5 years because they are being considered that they were doing drug trafficking, right? So the situation is not good. It's getting worse. And despite the fact that we have currently a socialist government that ideally had in their program the legalization of cannabis, but this is not happening.
And do you think that the government is being pushed towards legalization or they're not?
I think it's kind of, it's so weird because on one side you have these worldwide governments, right, with very important medical cannabis regulation being set up, like Canada, Australia, you know, and you can see that they have clinical evidence for recommending cannabis for certain type of sickness, right? But in Spain, this scientific evidence is not recognized. It's like it doesn't exist, right? There's not enough evidence and we need to protect the patients. So that's why it's not regulating. You mentioned, and this is what has happened here in Spain, the fact that some cities like Barcelona, Girona, or governments like the government of Catalonia, the government of the Basque Country, and the government of Navarra, they have tried to regulate the clubs, the social clubs, to give them a legal framework that would allow them to be in a legal position, because nowadays you can cultivate, but you cannot traffic with it. So normally, if you have a club in the middle of the city, it's quite obvious that you're not going to have your 100 or 200 plants in the middle of the city. You'll have them in a field, right? And then you will have to transport that for the club members. Well, that transport is illegal, right? So in de facto, the situation of the clubs is really precarious. And this is the place where the patients get their cannabis, right? Because it's better than getting into the black market. The problem is that these clubs, they are geared towards recreational use of cannabis. And of course, the patients, they don't want to get high when they, we have very vulnerable patients that have chronic sicknesses. So they want to be able to have the appropriate levels of cannabinoids. And this means combinations with high CBD. And this is not that easy to get in the clubs, right? We have selected 5-6 clubs in Barcelona where they have more CBD-oriented products. But even in this case, we find that there are raids by the police and they take all the product away. So patients, they don't have access to the product anymore.
So the issue in Spain is more that patients, perhaps like yourself and many others who want low THC but high CBD products, are not sure about the quality of those products because there's regulation. And on top of that, the government's gray area, which they've allowed to fester, has not really allowed the creation of more high quality, reliable CBD products across Spain, right?
In fact, the situation is really amazing. Like in October 2018 and in 2019, we started having raids in the grow shops, which is like, I don't know if in other countries you have these shops, but shops where they sell all kind of paraphernalia for you to cultivate your cannabis at home, right? They were selling extracts from CBD. right? And they started having raids where the police would just take all the product, all the CBD, because it was this regulation coming from Europe that all countries would have could do whatever they wanted in this interim period where the CBD was being considered as a novel food, to do whatever they wanted. And Spain decided that the best thing to do was to take away all the CBD product. So
Okay.
what happened?
Sorry.
Yes.
We'll come back to that. I want to know what the latest situation is, but I'm just going to ask what the situation is in Germany.
Yes, sure.
And in France, so that we can. Kai, tell me more about the situation in Germany, because you said that you work as a lawyer rather than an activist in this field. Well, you could call yourself an activist lawyer, I suppose. But what is the situation in Germany? Because you said to me that you were quite optimistic that it would change very soon. Why is that?
Yeah, so 2017 was a great year for cannabis in Germany, as medical cannabis was legalized. And it was a strong legal framework was built for medical cannabis. And we have also the issue of reimbursement for medical cannabis patients. So you can apply for reimbursement. 60 to 70% of these applications are approved. So patients can really get EU GMP certified medical cannabis on a high quality level. And that's great. We started with 2 tons, and at the end of 2020, we will be at 20 tons of medical cannabis imported to Germany, and the domestic cultivation will start as well next year. The first harvest is going to be expected next year. So that was great progress in terms of cannabis, legal cannabis in the country. But on the other hand, we still have the black market, and the black market has approximately 500 to 800 tons in the black market, which is equivalent of a market volume of 8 billion euros. And no state control, no quality control. This business is only left to the organized crime. And many people and many parties have realized that, especially the Green Party. And the Green Party is in strong favor of legalization. So they are working on that for a couple of years already. They have the so-called Cannabis Control Act. This is a draft which would legalize and regulate a free market, a free cannabis market. This Cannabis Control Act was in the Bundestag, in the Federal Diet, already in 2017. In 2017, we were 5 minutes before legalization because they were negotiating the new government by that time. But then the liberals draw back from government, and then the big coalition, the grand coalition, came in place. But this legalization topic is still going on. The discussion, the debate is going on. And Corona stopped this debate a little, but the debate will come back next year. Next year, we will have the next federal elections in Germany in September. The Greens are strong in the polls. They overran the Conservative Party at the beginning of this year before Corona, so they were stronger. And it might be that the Green Party always will have the chancellor next year. And if that happens, if they are strong like this today, so they will be part of the next government, and they will introduce and they will demand that their Cannabis Control Act will be installed. And the Cannabis Control Act, sorry.
No, sorry, it's fine. I just wanted to ask you on a slightly separate topic. So we are expecting, as you said, that the Greens come into as part of a coalition, get into power in Germany, and as a result, the cannabis laws are reformed very quickly over there. But you said also to me that your focus is these days on trying to get the legal market ready for expanding production, so that it can deal with the fact that there's so much illegal product out there in the black market. Why are you doing that? Why are you worried about having more legal products?
because you, if you want to establish a legal market, you have to have legal product. So we'll have to. We can now start to think about where does these 500 to 800 tons come from? From Canada, from Uruguay, from whereabouts in the world. The thing is, even if the next government would agree on cannabis reform, so the next federal election will be in September 2021, then the law will be agreed on in January 2022. Then you have a 2-year period where you will either have to terminate the single convention, the termination period of the single convention, and then you can re-enter the single convention with the exempt of cannabis. And in these 2 years, you have time, the industry would have time to adapt to the new situation, to supply, to establish the supply chain, to agree on all the rules of product quality, of social responsibility. The Cannabis Control Act has detailed provisions on social responsibility. The shopkeepers have to have a social concept in place. How they fit into the community around them. The staff of the shops have to have a certificate. It's called responsible selling. The whole industry, a whole consulting industry around these certificates will establish as well. And then you have to agree on the rules in detail. So they are, it is intended that the staff members can identify critical use patterns with their clients, and then they're obliged to speak with the client about that and to recommend the social prevention drug centers, something like this. So this is very, very detailed, and we have to then work out how these detailed provisions from the Cannabis Control Act are transferred to a real market, to real life, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, that would be a challenge. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for the summary. Ludovic, let's come to you. Now, Ludovic and Rachou, you told me that you travel between France and the UK a lot, and you have CBD products in both. How you also said that actually you see a very encouraging environment in France. Why do you say that?
Well, France has always been a big producer of hemp, the biggest one in Europe. We count for half of the production of hemp in Europe. And it kind of makes sense when, with the development of a whole CBD and cannabis industry, French MPs and French farmers actually wanted to change regulation to be allowed to do something about this, or this hemp flowers which are not used currently in France. And so French MPs decided to study the subject of hemp and divided it in 3 parts. First part was medical cannabis, which after a year of discussions with different ministers in France, it's actually going to end up with an experiment in France next January, which is going to start with 3,000 patients. And we're going to try, it's a 2-year period when we're going to try out new cannabinoid medicine, or maybe even smokable products. The list of products hasn't been published yet. And it's going to start, next year. For 2 years, which might end up in opening up a medicinal cannabis market. So that's actually a really good thing. But with everything in France, it takes a bit of time, and it's quite complex, because for this experiment, since we don't already have medical cannabis companies in France already working on the subject, or no national production, it's going to only be imported products, which in the end, the companies, the pharmaceutical companies, are going to have to supply it free for French patients for 2 years. So it kind of necessitates a huge investment from foreign companies. So it actually raises questions to whereas this experiment is going to be made in good conditions, and will it be applicable? I mean, at the end of the 2 years, what actual products are the patients going to be able to buy? Is it going to be French products, etc.? So that's for the medical side of it. Then we're also studying the CBD market as well, because when you look at what's going out really close to the EU, in just across the channel in the UK, CBD is already a huge market. It's sold everywhere, in pharmacies, at booths, even in supermarkets. So definitely, I mean, French companies want to grab the opportunity and want to be able to sell CBD products. And when you look at the CBD market in France, it's already being sold in small shops called CBD shops, And what they do is they sell flowers to smoke, so CBD flowers, which are kind of a gray status when it comes to being legal or not. And they start selling a lot more of CBD edibles as well. So we see demand switching from flowers to edibles, which are kind of more mainstream products and a bit less more harmful when it comes to health. An interesting thing about legalization on a wider term is that they're actually studying, they just started, the French Parliament just started studying legalization and what would be the outcomes, etc., etc. And I think it's probably going to be a subject for debates in the upcoming 2022 election. The current president, Emmanuel Macron, he's always been opposed to legalizing on a personal basis. But I think some ministers in his government are quite open to it. But in the same time, we've got some people which are open to it, such as the Greens, for instance, or the left. But inside the government, you've got, for instance, the kind of guy who handles all the police force and everything, and he just passed through a new regulation, putting a fine for consumers on drug, which is something automatic, which wasn't in place before. And they've been publishing on Twitter every week the amount of fines they've been putting to French consumers on cannabis. So it's kind of a double language. On one side, it's opening up with the experiment on medical cannabis and everything going on CBD. And on the other end, you've got this new fine for users, which doesn't make any sense. It's about €200 fine, and it's actually inscribed in your personal file. So if you apply for a job, there would actually be a mention of it if your employer asks for your judicial file. So that's kind of a mixed message in France. But I think it's going to be a topic coming up for the next election in 2 years' time.
So all of you, it seems to me that your fight, or let's say your activism, is primarily focused on your country where you live, as opposed to on an EU level. And so I guess that raises a simple question, which is, is this campaigning, how much of the future of cannabis in the EU depends on Brussels or Luxembourg, what happens there, and how much of it is reliant on what happens in your country? And, and there's also this case going on right now, which is this kind of vape case, which, as far as I understand it, is a situation where a French company imported CBD products from the Czech Republic. And because those products, if derived from the flower, are seen as a narcotic in France, there's this case going against them, but they're arguing that actually we're importing from another EU country. And so if the case goes for them and says that actually EU companies should be allowed to import EU products from other EU countries, then it might change legislation very fast. So are you, all of you, looking at, I guess that's my question. So are you looking more at the EU, or are you looking more at what's happening in your local country instead? Queralt, why don't you go first?
It's a difficult question. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me well?
Don't worry, we can hear you.
Okay. It's a difficult question because on one side, it's true that anything that Europe says is applied then to the countries, right? But many times the European Union leaves this situation quite open for the country to decide what to do. And in fact, the CBD case of the treatment of novel food it's an example of that, right? The European Union said, okay, this is going to be treated as novel food, CBD, you do whatever you want. Each country has the right to deal with this issue while we are considering as you want. And then they decided to retire all the product in the market. So I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that I'm not a lawyer, so I think lawyers have a better knowledge about this issue. I would be happy if they would, it makes sense that they would approve the maintenance of the European market. Europe is only a market. We don't have a common policy, fiscal policy, but we have a market. If this is not respected, then what is left? So I guess it makes sense that they would go for the possibility to import products from other countries where they are legal. And at the same time, the question is, can anyone check whether the CBD comes from the flower or comes from the seed? Because that's the difference coming from the, if you read at the treatise, it seems that it's not a problem if CBD is extracted from anything but the flower. So, I mean, what's the point of this prosecuting this company? Can they really prove that this comes from the flower? I don't know. It's difficult for me. I pass the possibility to the lawyers that they are more able to answer. But I mean, there are many questions there.
Yeah, let's do that. Kai, could you weigh in on this debate?
Perspective of legalization or the content. So if you look at Luxembourg, for example, Luxembourg has agreed on legalization. They will legalize in 2 or 3 years. They agreed on solely on domestic production, so they don't have any import or export issues. But the former health minister of Luxembourg, Etienne Schneider, who was the architect of this reform, he said he called on his European colleagues to find a unanimous position within the EU on cannabis reform. So, of course, this would help a lot, very much so. But as all European member states are also member of the Single Convention, so treaty partners of the Single Convention and have to fulfill the obligations of the Single Convention. So every European country set up his own narcotic law regime. And that's the reason why we have hemp extracts are legal in the Czech Republic, are not legal in France, are sort of legal in Germany, and this is a big mess all around Europe. So it would definitely help, and I think it's a task, it's the job of the European Union. They harmonize everything, so they would have to harmonize medical cannabis in the first place. Of course, because if Europe says medical, it means medical, and this should be acknowledged all over the European Union. But of course, we should find a unanimous position on cannabis reform when it comes to recreational, of course, because the mess is for example, in Germany, hemp leaf tea is on the shelves for centuries. It has ever been on the shelves for centuries. I can go around the corner of my office and buy it. I have it here behind me. But the courts in Germany say, no, it's not processed. It's coming directly from the field as a herbal tea. It should be not processed directly for the consumer. So this is an illegal commodity if you look at the courts. But the federal authorities say no. It's only it has only to be assessed by food law. So they are not consistent in their acting and in their positions. And this mess has to end. So we have to have next year federal elections to bring a consistent position in all these cannabis hemp issues. And the cannabis case you mentioned is very interesting because it has the potential to be a so-called precedent. The general advocate, Mr. Tanchev, explicitly said that hemp extracts are a legal commodity because Article 28, paragraph 2 of the Single Convention excludes every industrial use from the Single Convention. So, and hemp extracts for the food industry or for the cosmetic industry is industrial use. So he said that, and if the court explicitly decides that hemp extracts are a legal commodity, then the European Commission will be bound by that. Will have to process the novel food applications, which they halted in July due to this preliminary opinion they have published in July. And this will also help in Germany itself here. So then you can go to the court and can say, look at the European Union. The court just decided that hemp extracts are a legal commodity. This would help a lot, of course. Yeah.
Just to clarify one point, hemp extracts, when taken from synthetics, are already legal. The problem seems to be that hemp extracts taken from the flower more naturally are seen currently as a narcotic, and that's why this confusion in the law exists, right? And so my understanding is that Cannavape was bringing in hemp extracts from the flower, and that's why they are being seen as breaking the law potentially. Now, Ludovic, you raised this case as well. Do you think that case will affect EU law? Are you looking forward to it? Do you think this is a big deal?
As Kai mentioned, I think the Cannavape case might have some huge repercussions on different units of the EU and the way that they actually interpret the text, the legal text, and the way that they will actually resume work on hemp-derived products in a wider term. And I believe, that this case will make a huge difference. And as Kai said, that we will actually be able to go see our own national courts, both in France or whichever country in the EU, and say, look, this case has been ruled out by the European Court of Justice, which is the highest court you can have in Europe. And this way, I mean, that's actually what Cannavape did, is they went to the European Court of Justice because for them it was the only court which was able to rule on such a difficult matter, and that kind of supersedes all national courts in France. So in the end, this case will definitely change something. And for us as a company selling CBD products in Europe, that is definitely a game changer and something that everyone is looking at, even outside investors, politics from all around Europe. I especially know that in France, French MPs are actually waiting on the Cannavape court case to actually finish their report on what the CBD market might look like in the future. And definitely, if the European Court of Justice says that hemp extract are legal, they will have to open up the market in France. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, basically. And that will make a huge difference. You also raised an interesting question earlier on, whereas we are actually focusing on national lobbying or at the European level. And I think the right answer is actually both, because in the end, the European Union is just a union of different state members, and you actually have to change the mentality and the way they think. You actually have to lobby for your own national country, which will probably then make the case at the European Union that there needs to be some change. And especially when you come from big countries such as Germany, Spain, or France, for instance, or Italy, which are kind of the key players in Europe. And for instance, definitely if Germany and France agree on something when it comes to regulation, it has a really, really high chance to go through it in the EU. And I think that's why it's really important both to educate EU lawmakers and national lawmakers so that they actually grab the subject and know it a bit better and make things move forward. But you definitely have to lobby at both levels.
That leads me to another question, which I think a lot of our viewers might be interested in. What do you think is the strongest argument for you in terms of legalization? Is it the economic potential? Is that more convincing and appealing, or is it sustainability? Is it justice, or is it healthcare? For each of you, what is the argument that you're pushing for, and what do you think will appeal to in your country? Briefly, though, please. So, Queralt, let's start with you. I'm assuming you're focused on healthcare.
Yes and no. There are three key elements that we highlight. First of all, in the latest state statistics that the government does, 84% of population was in favor of legalization of medical cannabis. That's a lot of people, 84%. It's really high numbers. So that is important. So people are already convinced, right? So that's good. First thing. Second thing is the fact that a lot of the patients that use cannabis, they don't use it because they just went out and tried cannabis. Actually, the people that get patients that get to cannabis as a medical proposition, it's because whatever they had before, either it didn't work, either they have really sicknesses that are rare, right? Either they are chronic patients where they have tried for many years analgesics and anti-inflammatories, and their bodies cannot sustain it anymore, and they have cannabis. So it's like a last resort medicine that has really amazing results, and everyone should be able to get this care, right? I mean, we have something that works, why don't use it? I mean, it's really a no-brainer, right? And lately, the third most important one has been for economic purposes. In fact, this is the most important argument that Podemos, which is a left-wing party in coalition with the Socialist Party in Spain, these two parties are governing now. This is the argument that they are using in order to convince the Socialist Party that they need to regulate cannabis. It's because we need money, and this is an industry. We have 5.5 million people consuming cannabis in Spain, right? So we need to make money out of it. There's a lot of potential tax income coming from regulating this market. So I think, if this gets regulated, it's going to be for the money. The argument of the money seems to be the one that is working the best right now. Let's see.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. Let's see what happens. And in Germany, what do you think, Kai, works best, and what are you focused on? Oh, so you're muted. I don't know why.
You're muted, Kai. We cannot hear you.
There you go.
It worked from alone last time. Okay. So in fact, all issues you mentioned are playing a role in the debate. If it comes to health, it will be decisive that we have controlled quality, controlled shops, controlled retailers, who have to stick to rules when producing and growing cannabis. We have so many cases of polluted and bad quality cannabis in the market, with heavy metals, with hairspray on it to increase the weight. This has to stop. This is dangerous for the health. This is dangerous for the community of 4-5 million cannabis users in Germany, and this has to stop. There was a study last year from Professor Haukapp. He's an economist specialized on regulated market. And he found out that the German government would save $1 billion if the police wouldn't have to wouldn't have to chase every stoner anymore in Germany. We have 180,000 preliminary proceedings, criminal proceedings, which have to start, but then they end at the prosecution office with a little fine or little money you have to pay. And this has to stop as well. So they can concentrate on real crime, on real issues, the police and the justice system. And of course, it's tax revenue streams, corporate taxes, working taxes, VAT, and 20,000 jobs are expected in case of legalization in Germany. So it's a bit of everything. And it's just good for society. It's time for that. And a second aspect, maybe, if the preliminary opinion would come into effect and hemp extracts would be illegal, then we would see a second black market. We have already one black market in cannabis terms, the recreational black market. And if you can't sell legally CBD oils, this is a huge market worldwide in the European Union, billions of dollars. And this market is already existing. There's a strong demand from the consumer for these products. And if you would criminalize that too, then there would be a second black market, and nobody can want that.
Right. And Ludovic, what about you? What do you think is the strongest argument?
It started in France because it was about getting more revenue for farmers, which is something that always works in France if you want to help the farmers. But then it actually kind of shifted with the whole COVID situation. And when you look at hemp, it's like the miraculous plant because it's sustainable. I mean, it's the best plant you can find on the planet. And it can actually bring jobs. So it's like green recovery plant for the European Union. And I think it's kind of the only plant in the world that actually fits in every category. You can do food out of it. You can do textile. You can do medicine. You can do food supplements. You can do basically everything with this plant. And I think when you look at it, it's possible that it might be a way to have a whole new economic activity out of hemp, and as Kai and Queralt mentioned, will be plenty of jobs, plenty of tax revenue, but especially it will be green revenue, and I think that's at the really a current trend all around Europe. You see with green parties coming up everywhere around Europe, and I think hemp is kind of the answer for everything. And so right now, I think the focus is, okay, you have a situation in your hand with economic recovery due to COVID, and hemp can be a part of the solution for everything. So I think that's where it's heading now.
And there was this discussion a few years back also as hemp as being a biofuel, which the EU wanted to push forward as a solution. Is that still the case? Is anyone still looking at the production of hemp as a biofuel as well? Because I know that it's big in the United States that they're examining that, but I've not seen that discussion much in the EU, and I wondered if for any of you that
there's been a research project in France recently by 2 engineers around hemp biofuel. But I think the issue with the project for now is that it would be economically viable only if you would allow for the plant to be fully exploited. So same thing goes again. But hemp is a great plant, but to be economically viable, you need to use all parts of the flower of the plant, including the flower. And by actually allowing the flower to be used, we'll be able to pour more money into hemp and hemp research and R&D to exploit all different uses. So I think for biofuel, it has been because there was no investment into hemp for now. But it might if we see hemp being more and more cultivated throughout Europe, it might actually happen and open up this debate again.
And lastly, just a brief question for all of you. When do you see legalization happening in terms of your own countries? Like, what's your the date that you're looking at, or is there not a date that you're looking at? You're still not sure. Ludovic, let's start with you. You tell me.
Well, I think when it comes to just regular CBD products, we're not talking about THC. I think that's just a matter of months, possibly 1 or 2 years tops. And if it comes to globally THC being legalized, whether as a drug for patients or just for cannabis users, I think it's more about 5 to 7 years, not the next election, but the one after that.
Interesting. And Kai, what about you? What do you think?
Next year, September 2021, we will have a new government. Cannabis Reform Act will be agreed on in January 2022, and the first shop will open in January 2024.
Wow, well, typical German efficiency. So we know the timelines and everything. Queralt, what about you? What do you see happening in the near future?
I'm so jealous of the Germans, really, on this. Wow. I mean, really, either it happens in 2021, next year, or it won't happen in at least 5 years, because it's just a matter of the government, the way the coalition works. It's highly unlikely. So for Spain, it doesn't look good.
Right, because you're worried that a different government might come in and their priorities might shift and they might do something else.
Yes.
So,
and because this government, in theory, was for legalization, and either they do it next year or it won't happen.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for such an informative and enlightening discussion. I want to thank Queralt from Spain, Kai from Germany, Ludovic from France and the UK. My name is Sunny Hundal. I'm a journalist. I want to thank Prohibition Partners for having this discussion. And there's everyone's names. So thank you so much for joining me. And I hope that our viewers found this interesting and enlightening as much as I did.
Thank you.